Welcome back to the Rebel's Edge. My brother Pete and I will break down for you exactly why IBM is breaking down today. And you might be surprised by at least one of the answers. We've got that, stocks, and sports on today's Rebel's Edge. Well, Pete, crude oil seeing a little bit of a pop. Iranian Republican Guard seeing a much bigger pop. I've been watching some of those, Pete. It's crazy when you see those military videos that CENTCOM has released. But a bigger story today might be IBM, and we're going to get to that in just a sec. So first, let's hit macro, which is that crude prices jumped pretty dramatically early on. And part of that reason was, I guess Trump was saying he was going to put a 20% tax on everybody going through the Strait of Hormuz. He has since pulled back from that, Pete. And so crude oil prices have dropped, not as dramatically as you might expect, but they have dropped, Pete.
Yeah, they're still up, like you said, John. I mean, I think they were over 80 earlier this morning or whatever. So, that's a pretty decent number. It's still close to 79 for WTI, I think. So looking at that, I find it really interesting. But the other thing is, we finally are here, John. We've been talking about it for a little while. It was 2 weeks away. It's a week away. And now here we are. The financials are kicking off the earnings season. So if people are kind of wondering, well, with the stuff going on with the Straits, why isn't the market down, 400 points or whatever? I think a lot of that has to do with how strong the earnings have been already, just kicking off. JPMorgan crushed it. Bank of America crushed it. Goldman Sachs crushed it. Wells Fargo crushed it. Citi crushed it. They all did, John. So, you know what? We've been talking about this for a long time. That has been one of the saviors of the market, month or quarter after quarter, I should say, because of the fact that they just can keep on rolling. And it starts with the financials. Then we start getting a little bit deeper into some of the technology names and everything else. But this is a pretty solid first day of a major earnings season kicking off, John.
Well, Jamie Dimon, Pete, when they announced their earnings and so forth, he also said that AI has helped them cut up to 40%, not of total staff, but of staff in certain areas. So, we're going to be hearing more about that from, I think, a lot of firms, all those banks, Pete, as well as some of the folks that you might not have expected would be impacted by AI. And we'll be reporting that to all of you. Yeah. All right. So we popped, crude oil popped and pulled back, not all the way back to unchanged, but only up 1.5% right now, Pete. What did that do to the VIX?
And that's where it's surprising, John, because I would have probably, both of us, expected to see the VIX make a pretty decent, move to the upside, right? But maybe taking a picture or a position very similar to what we were just describing, that, hey, you know what? The financials sure did look pretty damn good, because the VIX itself, John, never really got all that high. It got up to 17.5 really early on before, a lot of the volumes were really ready to go. And meanwhile, here we are sitting in the low 16s once again. So I find it pretty interesting, the fact that where we're trading right now, call it 16.5, which is actually down about 4% or something close to that. I would say that it's a little bit surprising, but given what we've seen from the financials so far, I don't know, John. I think it makes a lot of sense, because we've been dealing with this Iran thing. If this were the very first time we have the bombing going on and everything else, or the first time that we've had a peace or whatever, that would be different. But we've seen this time and time again, like a clock every couple of weeks. Here we are once again. Here we are once again. So I think it's one of those things where people are actually starting to adjust to that.
Well, we're going to have, Pete, on the 29th of July, another Fed announcement.
Yeah.
And right now, the prediction markets are saying that predictions are for 93% chance of zero, nothing happening, 1% chance of a cut, which means there's a very small chance that maybe we see a rate hike. I think the markets are taking that in stride.
Yeah, I think you're right. By the way, the CME tool is at 87%. So it's a little bit lower than what Polymarket's got up there, at 93%. Either way, it's pretty dominated that, yeah, this is probably how this is going to play out. And, another pause probably in front of us. So I think given that and what's going on, I think it's been going pretty well, John, with Kevin Warsh, what he's been doing back there. I keep pointing back towards my TV in the other room because it's been very, very interesting just to see what this looks like. And it feels like it's a little different than some of the times with Powell and so forth. And I think he's giving the markets a little bit of confidence by the answers to the questions that he's getting.
Well, let's dive into IBM, Pete.
Yeah.
Because as I said in the cold open, the numbers that they reported were really not that bad. 293 was the bottom line number. In other words, profit per share. But they expected 301. Now that's a 2% miss, Pete. So as you said, I think it's more what Arvind Krishna was saying during his talk with the analysts after the numbers were reported. And he didn't sound as confident. And I think one of the reasons, Pete, is that IBM had a big run. It was up into the 340s. And now, after today's move, it traded to 215. So he's under some pressure internally, not just from the analysts on the outside.
Yeah, and some of the commentary that he had out there, I mean, that says it all right. I mean, you don't even have to say anything practically. I mean, just looking at that is just a dramatic move. That's not a move that IBM makes, right? I mean, it's not one of those companies. Sure, there are companies out there that are going to make those kind of moves that are 20% on a much more consistent basis, but that's not what IBM is. But Krishna, I think, John, he talked about the shift of memory and hardware and all the rest of those kind of things. The weakness that they've got in software and consulting and infrastructure and all of that, and all, that puts you into a little bit of a spot. But, the one thing that they didn't miss very much on the earnings, but the revenue, John, that was another spot where I would have to say that was a pretty decent miss. I mean, $17.2 billion versus $17.85 billion. You know what? They're just, with all of what we just lined up there for you, it makes sense that IBM is moving the way it is right now. That being said, is there an opportunity there? I know, just like you, John, I'm going to be on top of this thing looking to see, hey, is there anybody out there on the unusual options world that's going to be coming in there that maybe gives us a little bit of a sense that maybe it's time to be there? Not today, probably, but at some point over the next couple of weeks, somewhere in the 1 month, maybe even future. But if we start seeing some options come in there that tell us that this thing maybe can have a pretty good recovery, I think I'd be pretty aggressively following along with that.
Well, we always watch technicals, Pete, even though you and I aren't, right, driven solely by that. But when IBM drops 25%, you're going to see the RSI going below 30, which for you technicians out there usually means you're pretty oversold. So I understand completely where Pete's coming from, and I'd be right there with you, Pete. We always say there's no one-day events, right, but this could be, sort of the flush of any remaining weak hands in IBM. And again, it was 350, Pete. I'm not saying it has to go back there, but it was 350, and today it's 215, or now it's 219, or whatever it is. That is just a horrendous loss of market cap, and perhaps for Krishna, a little credibility.
Yeah,
we'll have to see. All right, Teradyne. These guys make testing equipment for semiconductors and for robotics, Pete. And if you were talking about two of the biggest headlines in stock market lore this year, it would probably be those two And if you threw in space, well, that would be the next, probably the third, because the fact that these guys are moving up pretty strong today, they benefit from all this advanced testing and all the rest that's necessary for not just semiconductors again, but robotics and so forth. So these guys are helping lift rather than hurt many of the other stocks in the chip space, like chip testing equipment and manufacturing like KLAC or AMAT and the others.
Strong demand for this advanced testing solutions, John, that they've got out there. Stock's up, what, 5% or something like that? Last I looked, that's about where it was. But 87% year over year revenue increase in Q1, just to kind of look back a little bit at what this company really looks like. It looks to me like they're probably in the right space. And obviously, with all the testing, John, and like you said, it's not just in one spot, it's also in the idea of robotics. I would say that this is a pretty interesting stock that people probably don't really pay enough attention to, but probably should be, because of the fact that they are one of the key players in this whole world, this automated testing of equipment. I mean, they're kind of the leader of that whole thing. So pretty daggone interesting. I like it. I think it's not talked about probably enough in the general media world or whatever, but yeah, names like Teradyne, I think, are pretty special. And I think that, if you want to be a little bit outside the box of everybody else, that's one of those names that I think makes a heck of a lot of sense.
Well, how about this one? And you keep touting it, Pete, along with JPMorgan, along with Citigroup, along with all of the big investment banks, but Goldman Sachs. Mm-hmm. So they reported they trade up again today. And what did they cite? Exactly what Pete cites almost every day when we hear a merger or an acquisition that just went on. And that is, of course, that those companies, that's great news for those companies, perhaps, but it's manna from heaven for the investment banks that did that, not only due diligence, but get the fees. And in this case, fees from the biggest IPO of all time, Pete. Mm-hmm. Even though 75 billion is a big number, of course. That's how much, when SpaceX came public, that's how much they raised. But this is just a blowout quarter for Goldman, Pete. And it made me think, are they going to split the stock? Because now it's an $1,100 monster.
Yeah.
Well, they have never, ever split their stock. Since they came public, Pete, they have never done a stock split. So does that mean that people will start talking about it? Because at $1,100, you might start hearing something like a 3-for-1 or a 5-for-1 stock split. What do you think?
Yeah, that would be pretty interesting if they did that, John. I mean, I'd love to look back and at a lot of these different names and see how does the stock react after they do a 3-for-1, a 5-for-1, a 2-for-1, whatever they do, and they split. Because in my head, it makes me think that a lot of the time, unfortunately, it puts them in a little bit of a different spot than where they were. And you know what? Maybe this is a good thing sometimes for some of these companies to be at a certain level, and the investors are going to have to just pay up. But as you said, John, their numbers that they put up were absolutely extraordinary. You don't get much better than this. A 55% increase in investment banking. Well, that was going to be predictable, especially because, like you did, talked about the SpaceX, but it wasn't just that. And you and I talked about these mergers and all these acquisitions and everything else. How about their earnings themselves? They were up 92% year over year. 92%. That's not so bad. Up almost 40% on the revenue as well. So everywhere you look, you just say, wow. In the investment banking side of it, the fees were up 20% versus Q1. I mean, everywhere you look, they did everything right. And I think Goldman Sachs, you know what, we talk about them all the time. We talk about these investment banks as well, John. And as we started off the show, when we said that they crushed in every single spot that there was, whether it be Goldman or JPMorgan or whomever else, I mean, Goldman Sachs definitely is sitting in a really, really good spot right now. Will they split it? They probably eventually will, I would guess. But I'm not sure. I need to go back and look at this. I'm not sure if it's always a good thing to split these things 2 for 1, 3 for 1, 5 for 1, or whatever. Maybe it is, but you know what? It does enter a spot where it offers a lot more people the opportunity to be there, which might create a little bit more volatility too. I don't know. I have to look.
Well, of course, they don't change the fundamentals of the company at all. Same company, same market cap. Nothing changes with the stock split. But access to the markets changes a little bit. I did ask it, Pete. I asked Grok, what happens when you do a 3 for 1 or a 4 for 1 or 5 for 1? And a year later, in both cases, the stocks are up between 5 and 20%. Now, they might have been doing very well anyway, but my specific question was, after a 3 for 1 on up, what do we see? And overall, whether it's tech, biotech, consumer products, whatever, they're up. So maybe that access to the markets does help hold those stocks up. But Berkshire doesn't split, the Warren Buffett company, and that's why it's trading where it is. And IBM hasn't split. So we'll be the first two, I guess, maybe to ask for it, Pete. And then somebody else will claim that they asked for it before we did or something.
Yeah.
All right. One more stock, Pete. HCA Healthcare, down almost double digits early on. Basically, pressure on hospital operators. The stock has, they get paid by insurance companies just like any big health provider does. But they had to narrow guidance, Pete, because they just don't know how much the government's willing to, and the other insurers. Government is one type of insurance, of course. The others are, the big companies that do provide health insurance, and they're not paying as much as some of these healthcare providers would like. And so these hospital operators have been under pretty good pressure, Pete.
Yeah, and I think that is the problem, John. And you talk about the analysts out there, and they're looking at the same thing that everybody else is looking at, and they're making those calls for exactly that. And then the concerns that they've got with Medicaid cuts and debt with the financials and all those kinds of things. Yeah, there's certain parts of the health world or whatever, and I would put Lilly and those types in there that make some sense. But when you're looking at the healthcare side of it, the hospital operators, that's a lot different, John. That makes it a little bit more difficult because they're kind of struggling right now. And I think the analysts are right. They're calling it out. And it's why probably that I don't know that you're involved in any of those names. I'm not either. So, it's just not the right timing right now. Maybe at some point in time that kind of gets cleaned up, but for now, I've just been staying away, and it looks like I'm not the only one because with the stock down 9 or 10% today, I think that sort of says it all.
Well, let's plug in an Ohio State player, Pete, just because we want hate from all the Michigan players out there. And but this guy is a phenom, and I think when you guys hear his statistics and who he's been chasing at Ohio State, you'll think that this is a pretty special kid because he is, and he might be the #1 overall pick, Pete. Wow. Let's take a look and a listen.
Jeremiah Smith is chasing 3 Ohio State legends, and he could pass them all this season. He needs just 39 catches to pass Emeka Egbuka for the receptions record, 341 yards to pass Michael Jenkins for receiving yards, and 9 touchdowns to pass Chris Olave for receiving scores. That is not just a breakout season. That is a chance to rewrite the entire Buckeyes record book. Smith already looks like one of the most gifted receivers Ohio State has ever had. Now, history is sitting right in front of him. Jeremiah Smith.
Wow, he is, Pete. I mean, I looked him up when I saw that video, and as a freshman, he played all 16 games, and he had 76 receptions for 1,300 yards as a freshman. Last year as a sophomore, or as our father would say, sophomore, he had 13 games and 87 receptions, 1,200 yards again, and double-digit touchdowns. and a lot of them are of the very long variety, because if you catch him and he has a little space, you're not going to keep up with him. You might make a stab at trying to catch the kid, but you're not catching him.
It's amazing how good some of the players at Ohio State really truly are, John. And wide receiver, whoever it is out there for Ohio State who goes out and finds these receivers and lands them, it's amazing, because you go through some of those names, and if you go through the NFL and you look just at the wide receiver position, God, Ohio State's got to be one of the leading, if not the biggest university as far as putting guys into the pros. So maybe that's why they keep on going there, John. Maybe that's why when they get recruited, they just figure, well, they got the right coaching, the right atmosphere, and the whole thing is pretty killer. So, I love watching those guys play. Some of those guys, they're just so daggone fast, and their hands are absolutely amazing. They just don't drop the ball. All right. Speaking of that, well, somebody's got to throw them the football, John, right? So when these receivers are all out there. So I wanted to do this because ESPN has been doing this for a while now, and they've got all these ratings, right? And their most watched, looked at thing that they've been talking about has been, because there is some controversy about it, the ranking of the top 5, maybe even the top 10 of the quarterbacks in the NFL. And so I thought it would be kind of a fun thing for you and I to take a look at. Now, I'm looking at the top 5, right? We've got Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Matt Stafford, Joe Burrow, and Lamar Jackson. They're basically all the same age, which I think is, kind of interesting. It says something. Although Stafford does stand out at 38 years old, so I'll push him a little further out. Oh, and by the way, he was the MVP. So the guy is pretty special at 38 years old, had a great career at Detroit before he went out to LA, and he's done pretty well. And how about his numbers just last year? Now, they have him ranked number 3. He's 46 touchdowns and 8 interceptions. Nobody else was really very close to that whole thing. No. Now, the difference between him and a lot of those other quarterbacks that we're talking about here, though, are those guys are really, really mobile and can run. And that makes a defense, you being a linebacker, me being a linebacker, that's a real royal pain in the ass, because you've got a guy, and especially when we talk about a guy like Josh Allen's bigger than a lot of tight ends, probably most tight ends, or as big as most tight ends. So the fact that guy can run, he averages over 5 yards a carry. I was looking up some of these guys, John. I mean, Lamar doesn't run nearly as much as you'd think, but he's still averaging about 5 yards a carry too. So Lamar Jackson's pretty special guy, I think. Josh Allen, pretty special guy, I think. There was one guy that's not on that top 5 that I know why he's not, because he's so young. But Drake May, I know that, they went to the Super Bowl last year. He had 31 touchdowns and 8 interceptions. Not so bad, right? I mean, this kid coming out of North Carolina, all that kind of thing, and, you just never know what you've got. He kind of does have that Brady build and all the rest of it, and that kind of, fits him pretty well. So he's another one. But who would you put as your number one, John, going into this year? And what I mean by that is, I don't care what he did necessarily 5 years ago or 3 years ago. Let's go off of last year and what they maybe did in the draft and the free agency and everything else. Is there one guy that you look at it and say, you know what? I think we got to go with Josh Allen or Matt Stafford or, Mahomes, because he got that running back from the Super Bowl champs or whatever, right? So what do you think?
Well, that running back certainly is going to help Patrick Mahomes, Pete, a lot, because they didn't really have that last year. So having this kid, I think, is a difference maker for at least 2 seasons. Thing is, as you and I know, running backs don't usually last much longer than that when you look at his age. So he's got to do it. But I think it'll definitely open up some opportunities for him to throw the ball more. Whatchamacallit, Travis Kelce, Pete, he used to be ranked among the top players at his position, and he certainly paid like it still, but he's getting old. And I'll be surprised if he is a big factor this year. He might even have to get benched pretty soon, Pete. This should be his last year. I will be shocked if he's still around much longer because, again, too many distractions, his age, and they've got to develop those younger players too.
Yeah.
So Patrick Mahomes is 31, is one of his favorite targets. Kelsey is, I think, coming up on 38, Pete.
Oh.
So he's as old as Stafford. But number one, Caleb Williams. And not just because I'm a homer, but when you look at the 2 seasons he put together, and you and I detailed that in his first season, he had 68 sacks because he had no offensive line. It was Swiss cheese. Now, last year, those sack numbers dropped dramatically, but then his center quits. So then they go out and they get another great center. Now, he hasn't played with the line yet, but I think you'll be able to plug him right in there. And I think Caleb, 3,500 yards passing each of his first 2 years, Pete, and 500 yards rushing. Jordan Love, who everybody loves to talk about Jordan Love, he hasn't had a single 4,000-yard season between passes and running. So Caleb is a dual threat. Jordan Love, not so much. So I'd say Caleb Williams, Josh Allen, and I'm looking for Justin Herbert to have a breakout one of these years, Pete.
Yeah.
If it doesn't happen pretty soon, they're going to trade him.
Yeah, I think he's pretty special. I think he's good. You know what I think happened to him last year, John? Both offensive tackles, left and right, were hurt.
Yep.
So
John Alt, yep.
Yeah. So we always got to be fair, and we try to be fair. You know, I see some of these guys go. I've been listening to people on ESPN radio talking about him and talking about, well, but he hasn't done this, and I'm like, it's a lot tougher when both tackles are gone.
Yeah.
And one of those tackles is a friend of ours, Alt. Who's about as good as it gets and about as big a human being as there is on the planet. I mean, he's an absolute monster. But, you know, a couple of injuries and you miss a few games, and the next thing you know, you start to slip a little bit. And, you know, it's just one of those things. But I still just love this Josh Allen kid, John. I think the world of him. They've got good receivers around him. They've got to make that move at some point and get over the hump. Whether that means they got to get past Kansas City or they got to get past Baltimore, or whoever it might be, it's going to be led by Josh Allen, and I think that guy is special. And because he can run so well, I think that just gives him a leg up. And I do think Patrick Mahomes, despite the fact they didn't go to the playoffs, he was kind of banged up a little bit as well, more than a little bit, a lot. I think that with the running back and so forth, that could be a different team this year for Kansas City. So it gives them at least a threat running the football because that guy's a heck of a running back. So, yeah, I look at it and I really like Josh Allen. So maybe I've got rose-colored glasses on him. But Joe Burrow, he's great. He just doesn't seem to be able to, and neither does the team of Cincinnati, can't seem to get past this whole thing. So I think it'll be interesting. I like Josh Allen a lot, so I'll say, hey, I think he's going to bring those guys to the Super Bowl, but it's going to take a lot to get there. John, one other thing. Okay. You know, there's still free agents out there, and there's some pretty big name free agents out there. Now, some of them are getting a little bit long in the tooth, getting a little bit older. But if you were out there and you're looking around, I'm looking at like Taylor Decker. For instance, he's the number one most available, the number one rank of the guys left available. I didn't realize this until I was checking this out, though, John. And he has a great ability to stop people. 90% is his blocking rate. So he's pretty daggone sharp guy. He asked to be released from Detroit, which I thought was really interesting. And nobody has picked him up yet. And probably the problem is money. My guess is that he's probably looking for a pretty substantial amount of money being an outstanding left tackle in the NFL. Then you've got guys like Joey Bosa. You've got Stephon Diggs. Stephon Diggs has a lot of things in the offseason that are not on the football side of things. I think that's the problem for him. Deebo Samuel's another guy. That guy played for San Francisco for a long time, bounced around a couple other places or whatever, but I'm a little bit surprised to see him. Tyreek Hill's another guy, not anywhere as of right now. What do you think about that? Joey Bosa? I mean, there's some pretty big names in there that are still available. and maybe it's a money thing, but do you think any of these guys are going to be floating around? I mean, what could happen is somebody gets hurt at one of the teams and they need somebody. Somebody needs an edge rusher, and all of a sudden Joey Bosa's over there going, I got you. What do you think?
Well, I think Von Miller, a guy you and I were with,
Yeah.
he wants to play in his 15th season. He might get a shot. He might not. The Bills and the Denver Broncos are two teams he's played with, Pete, and he'd love to go back to either. He expressed interest in the Cowboys, but then the Cowboys didn't express an interest in him, and he's a Texas kid.
Yeah.
So I think that's why he'd kind of like to go there. Maybe the taxes have something to do with it. But
Maybe.
yeah, I don't know. I mean, I like your pick better than mine.
Well, it's pretty cool. It's still, you know, I mean, it's a quiet time right now, sports wise or whatever, for the most part. You know, everybody's got something going on, but you know, we're getting closer and closer to those camps, John. So we'll be keeping an eye on that and see. But I'm going to say Taylor Decker gets some money from somebody, because there's always going to be a team that's just a player away from getting to the Super Bowl, they think. And I think a guy like him at his ability, I think somebody's going to have to sign him to their team. So we'll see how it goes.
You got to wonder, Pete, why the talks broke down.
Yeah.
Because, you know, he's a heck of a player. He's 32 years old. Tackles can easily play. You know, you could easily see a kid playing to 35, 36, unless there are, you know, injuries that haven't been widely talked about.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying there are. I'm just saying it's surprising that nobody else has stepped up.
Yeah.
Because all he wanted was a contract extension for 2 or 3 years. And when he didn't get it, he said, I'm out. And they said, okay, see ya. So interesting.
Yeah.
As it always is in the NFL. All right. Thanks for joining us, folks. We will be back tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern Time with another Rebels Edge. We hope you can join us then, and good luck trading the markets today, folks.